All right. So, hello everyone. I'm Kelsey Lemon, Senior Technical Marketing Manager here at VMware, and I want to welcome you to our webinar where we're going to be focusing on providing you all tips and tricks to help you get the most out of the Skyline service. And we're going to be doing something very special for today's webinar. Today we have Don Horrox from Moffitt Cancer Center, and he's going to share his experience with Skyline and how he's used the service to avoid unplanned downtime. And in addition to Don, right, we've got Senior Product Marketing Manager Michelle Clopton and Senior Technical Marketing Engineer Sai Nguyen, who will be monitoring our Q&A pod and answering your questions. So make sure that you're using that Q&A option at the bottom of the screen there. And for those of you who are willing to briefly share your success story, we're going to do something very special for you all as well. You can win some very awesome Skyline swag. Michelle, what are we giving away today?
We have 3 t-shirts, so limited edition Skyline t-shirts to give away for our promotion.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. And so we'll be making sure that we've got opportunity to give those away. And again, speaking of Q&A, right, we've got some questions that we would like to ask you all as well in order to facilitate today's discussion. So let's go ahead and get that started. So I've got a couple questions, some of the obvious stuff, right? We'd like to know, what your current level of support is. Do you currently have a TAM or not? We'd like to know if you're currently using Skyline. And if not, fear not, you're going to learn a lot about the service and hopefully you will want to become a user after that. And if you are using Skyline, how many people on your team are leveraging the service? And again, if you're also leveraging Skyline, we'd like to know what your favorite feature is. I have my own, but I'm not going to taint the results by telling you what it is. I want to see what you all feel is the best feature. We'd like to know, of course, if you've acted on any of Skyline's proactive findings and recommendations, and what ticketing systems are you using right now? If you're using View or PagerDuty ServiceNow, and also where do you live on social media? What's the best way to get in contact with you to let you know of latest updates and features and things along those lines? So we give it a minute here.
Yeah, I'm just seeing some responses coming in. So
okay.
Great.
Give it a minute. Yep.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
And whenever you're ready to close it out, just feel free to read the results.
Okay, great. Folks, another few seconds here. I know there's a lot of questions. Yep, still seeing some responses, so that's great.
Good deal, good deal.
Okay, I'm gonna end it here in about 10 seconds.
9, 8. Sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna end it and I'm gonna share the results. Okay, so for support level, majority of the people have production support, followed closely by Premier and Basic. Do you have a TAM? Majority of people do have a TAM. Others are not sure. So it might be something you want to find out because TAMs add a great deal of value. So if you have one, you should definitely be taking advantage of that.
Definitely.
Looks like everyone's using Skyline who voted, which is awesome. How many people? 1 to 5 people on the team using it. Okay, favorite feature, upgrade recommendations, which is fantastic. Followed closely by the operational summary dashboard and the insights reports, which are fairly new. So glad people are using those. And have you acted on proactive findings? The majority have, which is great because that's what Skyline is all about. Which of the following systems? Looks like a lot of people using ServiceNow, some Jira, some people are not at all. And then social media, LinkedIn, followed by Twitter and Facebook, kind of neck and neck.
Good deal. So thanks for providing that info, and we're going to be leveraging that in today's discussion. So, and so with that, let's just go ahead and just go into our agenda here. So let me go ahead and advance here. So like I said, we've got something for everyone, so for those of you who are looking to learn more about the service, I'm going to give a quick overview of Skyline and talk about the value that the service provides, right? And then for those of you who have already adopted the service, I'm going to talk about the latest updates before we turn it over to our guest speaker, Don. And of course, like I said, we'll definitely make time for those giveaways. And so with that, let's just jump right into it and talk about the Skyline service itself by answering that key question for those of you who aren't leveraging, what is Skyline exactly, right? And so to answer that question, I want to set some context, right, about the overall support experience that I'm sure that you can all relate to. So here goes. As a customer, I'm sure you're very familiar, right, with that traditional, that very reactive support scenario, right, where you experience an issue in your environment, you open up an SR with VMware, then our tech support team troubleshoots and works with you to resolve that issue, right? Well, with that being said, right, Skyline is actually the next step in that process. Is actually a proactive support technology, meaning that it can actually help you avoid issues before they happen. So you don't even have the problem in the first place. And with that, right, Skyline also helps resolve existing issues faster. So say, for example, if you have a case open with us, our tech support engineers can use Skyline to view your environment-specific configurations. And then at that point, they can actually use data-driven analytics, right, to speed discovery and ultimately drive those faster resolution times. And Skyline's automated, detection and proactive, that remediation, that guidance, right? It actually helps strengthen your environments, right? And so with the service, you can, again, avoid that IT downtime, and then you can actually reallocate that time to do more valuable work. But here's the best part. Skyline is available at no additional cost with your active production premier support contracts. And I'm also very happy to say that Skyline is actually included with Success 360, as well as our vRealize Cloud Universal subscriptions. And speaking of environment specific configurations, Skyline supports all the products listed here. And I'm getting ready to open it up for a second here, Michelle, but I do want to talk real quickly about the value that Skyline is driving to our customers, right? We're hearing that Skyline helps our customers avoid constantly being in that firefighting mode, right? Our customers are reducing costly downtime, which quite frankly is often caused by misconfigurations. And that increased network reliability, actually, again, it translates into less time fixing errors. And as you can see here from a recent industry report, 1 hour of downtime, just 1 hour, for an enterprise averages around $500,000. And customers who are strategically making that decision to take a more proactive approach to support are significantly, reducing that unplanned downtime. So we're talking about hundreds of hours of here. And to date, right, Skyline has helped over 12,000 plus customers identify nearly 90 million objects in their environments with potential issues. And our customers have proactively resolved more than 60% of those on their own. And when there are times where you may need to react to an issue that wasn't proactively resolved, right? Skyline can support you here as well with my favorite feature, Log Assist, which is 17 times faster than that manual log upload and transfer process, right? And again, we've done the math, and that translates into nearly 100,000 hours saved. And if you've done, and I'm sure Don's going to attest to this later. And if you've done that traditional log transfer process, right, I'm sure you can relate to how slow this is, right? So that log assist feature, which again is my favorite feature, removes that pain, again, giving you that very valuable time back to do more meaningful work. And so how does Skyline work, right, to enable these benefits? And so a couple things needs to happen, right? First you need to install and configure a lightweight appliance called the Skyline collector into your environment. And then once that collector is installed and configured to your endpoints, right, it starts to listen and it starts to collect product usage data, right? And then based on this data, Skyline will then perform a comprehensive analysis of all your environment details. And then at that point, Skyline begins to act, right, to provide those proactive findings via a web-based portal. And And whenever I talk about that, right, whenever I talk about how the collector works, inevitably questions around security comes up. So let's get into it, right? When you activate Skyline, you consent to participate in VMware's Enhanced Customer Experience Improvement Program, otherwise known as CEIP. And basically what that does is it allows VMware to collect configuration, feature usage, performance data, as well as product logs to provide recommendations, those insights, as well as even support to basically drive product improvement. The data that is collected is transmitted to VMware using TLS 1.2 encryption protocols, and product usage data that is sent to our storage platform is encrypted in transit and at rest. And I should also point out that all data is tagged with legally identifiable customer information, and customer access is limited to VMware employees and support and management. In addition to that, right, they all must undergo training and receive manager approval. Should also point out that no personally identifiable information, that PII, right, is collected. But with that said, you shouldn't enter personal data or sensitive data, when you're naming your system, such as your ESXi hosts on your virtual machines and things along those lines. And also, I get this question a lot. Skyline is SOC 2 compliant as well. And Michelle, before I go into the what's new, I'm going to see if anyone wants to come on and get some free swag and share their success with this service.
Yeah, so if you would like to speak and just briefly share your quick Skyline success story, we can unmute you, or you can type it into the chat box.
That works as well too.
We'd love to hear it.
Get some cool swag.
Yes. So whether it's avoiding a critical issue or saving a lot of time with log assist or helping with upgrade planning, we'd love to hear it.
Or even talking about, like you said, that favorite feature that seems to be number one right now, upgrade recommendation. So if you voted on that, tell us about your success. You can, again, come off mute, or you can just type it in chat. And with that, I'm just going to go into what's new and talk about some of the latest enhancements. As a matter of fact, we just recently had an update. Was it Sunny, Michelle? Wasn't it like last week? Like very recent, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, right, last week's update, it really focused on improving, Skyline's notification capabilities, right? We've extended end of general support and end of technical guidance notifications to include ESXi hosts. You'll see them in a notifications panel located on the Skyline Advisor dashboard. And basically what this enables you to do, right, is it enables you to view host expirations along with the other expirations for other products that are in your inventory, right? We've also sped up the removal of unhealthy collector health status notifications, right? Meaning that you're going to get a more accurate snapshot of the status of your environment's overall health when you log into the dashboard. And we've also enhanced VMware Success 360 Insight report notifications. So basically what that means in a nutshell is that you're going to receive email notifications when a VMware Success 360 Insight report has been generated. And those emails are going to include context-sensitive links directly to the reports in Skyline Advisor Pro. And in addition to that, when you download a report in the PDF format, these files are going to also include context-sensitive links to the reports that are in Advisor Pro. And as always, it goes without saying, we've also provided new findings and recommendations. So be sure to check out that findings catalog. And with that, let's just segue into the customer interview. And so this is sort of set things up. Now I'm going to just cue you up a little bit, So here's a little bit about Moffitt Cancer Center, right? They're the only National Cancer Institute design center in Florida. And since they've adopted Skyline, they've integrated across 2 vCenters with thousands of objects. And Don, I can see by the quote here that you're a fan of both Skyline's proactive support capabilities with its findings and recommendations, but you're also a big fan of its reactive support tool, Log Assist. So were you surprised by the poll results earlier? I know I was a little bit.
I was a little bit surprised. Log Assist is definitely my favorite feature as well. But it's really I think that's a great testament to. It sounds like a lot of the customers who voted are perhaps in that state where they're not quite as reactive, and maybe that influenced the vote. So if they're looking at more proactive findings as
very
their
good.
favorite feature, maybe they're in a really good place.
I agree. That's a very good point. And so with that, Don, my friend, I want to officially welcome you. And so, Don, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background and your areas of expertise, and when you started using VMware products?
Sure. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, my name is Don Horrox. I've been working with Moffitt Cancer Center for, this will be my third year. I've been in the industry since 2008, starting in desktop support for a insurance marketing company based in Clearwater, Florida. And I then went on to work at Tampa General Hospital in a couple different roles, from desktop support to system engineering for just about, was it 8 years? So that was a really eye-opening experience, transitioning from insurance marketing to healthcare. And that was my first experience with VMware products as well. So, working in the systems engineering role, everything from building VMs, assisting with upgrading, vCenter server appliances, things of that nature.
Deal. Lots of time in the industry, I see, and, with that being said, can you give us a snapshot of your environment, right? Your digital transformation over the last, few years, what are your areas of focus in terms of your business, in terms of like, what does your environment looks like?
Sure. Well, our environment's changed so much over the last 3 years. When I started with Moffitt, we were on vCenter and vSphere 6.5, and we had aggressive plans to migrate to, at the time, 6.7 and now 7.0. We've done a lot in terms of changing our platforms. We run on Dell PowerEdge servers. We did a really fantastic job with lifecycle, hardware refresh, and with that came the need from our research department to say, hey, we want to really look into things with AI and what NVIDIA GPUs can do for us. And so we have that demand, and we've worked very closely with our partners to implement that technology in some of our hosts to further, some really aggressive and groundbreaking research in the clinical space.
Yeah, I see that you're moving from. Looks like you're on NSXT now, so you're moving over from NSXD. It looks like you're migrating over.
Correct. Yeah, we just was it 2 weeks ago, migrated from NSXD to NSXT, and we're wrapping up that project now.
Good deal. And Skyline Health Diagnostics. Speaking of reactive, you're leveraging that as well.
Yeah, and we do have a TAM with Moffitt, so we turn to him for a lot of post-escalation review type things, ad hoc advice and whatnot. And that's a tool that he turned me on to a couple of years ago when it was first released. And that's absolutely a reactive tool. We hope to never use it, but sometimes we do. And it's great because, with the log parsing and analysis that it provides, it can really point you in the right direction when you do suffer from a PSOD or any sort of adverse event. You can
speed up discovery.
Exactly, in tandem with already submitting a ticket to GSS. This gives you another tool to perhaps speed up that process for resolution and dive into things yourself as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you got Skyline, right, you got Advisor, which is, again, very, very proactive, and it's a self-serve kind of thing where you can make, the remediations on your own. And then you've got the reactive in terms of Skyline Health Diagnostics, where you can also self-serve and you can do reactive, but then you can actually go back to Skyline Advisor when you want to do reactive with the addition of some additional support from VMware with the log assist feature. So it's a all-encompassing sort of thing underneath the Skyline umbrella where you can do both self-serve reactive and proactive support.
Absolutely.
That's definitely. And so, with that, and you sort of talked about it earlier, but, when did you start using Skyline, and how are you using it right now?
We started using Skyline. I was very new into my Moffitt career, so it was probably almost 3 years ago. And that was another utility that our solution that our TAM recommended for us. And so we deployed our first Skyline collector, around that time. And there were all sorts of findings that came in. If you think about where Skyline was several years ago to now, there's even more findings, right? But back in that time, we were still surprised that there were 30 plus findings, many of which were actionable in short time. And we still use Skyline today. Of course, I said logs. This is my favorite feature. So every time I open a GSS case, before they even ask for logs, I already have them on the way. So that speeds up our resolution for our cases. But we do use Skyline absolutely for the findings, so we can look at ways to fortify and improve our own environment, and also to assess for upgrades. Upgrade recommendations. We're looking to go from vSphere 7.0 update 2 to update 3. And we can look at the upgrade recommendations. Number one. Yeah, exactly right. Number one. Yeah. So we can look at that information to, double check interoperability. There's a lot of information that you can otherwise, you can spend the time to look at it all yourself manually. But if you go to Skyline, it puts it all together really nicely for you.
It's all there, and you're right. I mean, upgrade recommendations is definitely a great tool in the sense that it, with the information that it provides, and you've got some planned downtime, you can use that to really make some really, really informed decisions about how you're going to make that most efficient use of that time by having Skyline sort of recommend where you are and where you need to be. And so it's definitely a great tool. And so with that, I'm going to just throw two questions at you really, really quickly here. So, has your usage changed over time? And what's the most powerful or compelling reason that you would tell a customer like yourself to adopt the technology?
Sure. Our usage has changed a little over time. Some of it is due to new features like upgrade recommendations. However, we're very much engaged in fortifying our environment and looking at ways to improve. We're expanding access across our team, to look at Skyline, because there are different, focuses. NSXT, for example, maybe a different set of eyes than other, solutions. As far as, the most compelling reason for other organizations to adopt Skyline, what I like about Skyline is it's an objective, data-driven approach to, to providing information to administrators that's actionable, right? So you're not getting recommendations that are only for one product, one solution, or from one aspect. You're getting multiple aspects, and it's enriched based on KB articles, post-escalation review, all those things. And so, again, it's objective. And it's up to the administrator to take that information and say, this is actionable in my environment, or maybe this is a best practice that we can't implement due to business constraints, but these are great things for us to be aware of.
That actionable, you can get some quick wins.
You absolutely can.
And you mentioned that whole idea around the other set of eyes, right? And again, that sense of comfort, that I hear is something that, a lot of customers I hear talking about. Like you said, it's like having another set of eyes, double checking, right? Dotting those I's, crossing those T's. And as we both know, being proactive is far less expensive than having to react to a support issue. So it's good that you're leveraging that data to make those informed decisions. And again, like you said, having that sense of comfort that another member of your team, if you will, is making sure that everything is accurate and up to date. And so with that, right, the last 2 years, it's been, very challenging, for everyone, right? For a while, lots of businesses, how has your company, adapted and maintained, resiliency during this time, and what role did Skyline play in those efforts?
Sure. Well, I think there's no secret that COVID-19 really changed a lot of things in our industry, among others. But like most organizations, we had a remote presence. We had some remote users who would VPN into the organization, not nearly the number that was required as a result of COVID-19. And so, we were challenged to increase our capacity greatly in that sense. And that has ties into networking, right? We need to make sure NSXV at the time was ready to go, fully equipped and performing optimally. And so we absolutely reference Skyline to say, hey, we may have looked over the findings before and looked for best practices and things that we'd like to look at eventually, but we should really prioritize some of these things because it's for the best interest of our environment, right? So we really benefited in that sense. Otherwise, we've continued to invest in our VDI presence with Horizon. And so while we don't have Skyline today integrated with our Verizon instance, we are very much, monitoring the underlying infrastructure, the rest of the environment. And so it all ties together, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, and you just touched on something that I think everybody in the audience can relate to, right? And it ties into what you said earlier, right? Being asked to do more with less, quite frankly. It seems as if, from what you've said, that Skyline has sort of evolved from simply being a tool to, like I said, being another member of your team, looking over your shoulder, that extra set of eyes to sort of help you monitor, monitor the environments that you're managing and just being more efficient and more effective in that workflow.
Absolutely. And I call it the coach's eye because there are things that that you should do. You should have NTP enabled on your host. You should have SSH ideally, disabled and only used for maintenance purposes. But the reality is you may forget to turn those things back off or on. And so it's great when that finding comes up, you're like, of course I have NTP enabled on this host. Oh, no, I don't. Let me go fix that. So it's great.
Awesome. Speaking of eyes, you're going to love my next graphic. Earlier, I gave a quick overview of the latest features in Skyline Advisor Pro that launched last week, right? But what is your impression of Skyline Advisor Pro as a whole, right? And how are you benefiting from it?
Sure. So we've had the great benefit of being Skyline customers for 3 years, I'll say. So we've seen a lot of great evolution over time, and we do view Skyline Advisor Pro as in a sense a partner to us in fortifying our environment and moving forward with improvements. So the initial impressions were that we have our device inventory that appears. It's obviously indexing a really great sample of our environment. It's painting a great picture for us to present to our leaders. And then there are features like log assist that save time right off the bat. You're right. I mean, you notice that the first time you use it. And so there's instant benefit in that aspect as well. And when you're going through things like upgrades, that's not a short process. If you're doing your documentation and your research, those are things that take a lot of time, and you appreciate any little bit of automation or assistance you can get, any validation, because some of those things can be risky, right? So if you're going to do an upgrade, you want to feel really good about it. Your leadership wants you to feel really good about it. And if you have intelligence provided by, a partner like Skyline, then everyone feels better at the end of the day, and you're making the most informed decision possible.
It's funny, like one of my colleagues, a gentleman by the name of Shannon Fitzpatrick, he says that upgrade recommendation sort of protects him from himself. You know what I mean? In the sense that it does provide you that insight, and it does use those analytics to make sure that everything goes according to plan. I know that when you and I were talking offline, you touched base on a couple things. You indicated that you saw that it was faster and that you liked the UI and that it was providing all these different insights. You want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. With the UI, first and foremost for me anyway, dark mode, much appreciated. Thanks to you and the team for implementing that. The UI is, it's definitely come a long way. And it's a more polished way of presenting to your leaders or people who aren't in vCenter, perhaps ever, or at least not every day.
Right.
You might want to still show them, these are our clusters. These are how many hosts we have, how many VMs, and take advantage of some of the pie charts and things like that. And Skyline Advisor Pro, illustrates that really nicely so that, you're not trying to, number one, organize the information yourself in a presentation. You can show them a nice, dynamic, interactive experience.
Right.
As you're walking them through that overview. And of course, there's the initial impressions with upgrade recommendations. I just recently started using that myself, and I'm already impressed with it because I'm accustomed to the manual way of,
Right.
Look at the interoperability matrix, look at the compatibility guide, look at all these things yourself, and
it's all right there in the
yeah,
environment. You never,
and
yeah.
seeing it all integrated it's a beautiful thing.
Most definitely, and it's funny, it's like, so, again, very glad that you're enjoying, Skyline Advisor Pro. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? As the team was sort of developing Advisor Pro, we were really listening to what the customers, like were saying, the customers were saying they wanted Skyline to be faster. And as you've noticed, our accelerated analysis, we've surfaced issues and remediation updates and inventory changes more quickly, within 4 hours, given, again, like you said, that more time to act on findings and recommendations when you're in proactive mode. Customers like you said they wanted to be smarter, and you've talked based on this several times with the insights and the data-driven analytics, right? So with that, we wanted to make sure that the product and the service provides more intelligence, right? So we've done that in a couple different ways. We've got the end-of-life guidance and historical insights, and if you're a Success 360 customer, you get access to exclusive features, including this new proactive insight reports. And then there's TAM health checks that I know you're a big fan of, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute. And lastly, customers like you said they wanted it to be easier and simpler to use, and like you just touched base on, we've redesigned the user interface for a more simpler user experience, while at the same time, working in things like a findings API, and we're going to be doing webinars about that more in the future, where you can actually, do things like automate common workflows like NTP, for example. So very, very good to hear that you're enjoying Advisor Pro. And speaking of simpler and easier to use, are you using the operational overview dashboard? And if so, what benefits is it providing you?
Sure, and I kind of touched on this earlier. When you're discussing with your leaders, people who aren't in vCenter every day or ever,
yeah.
It's a really nice picture to paint for them because it's interactive. You can drill into your clusters. You can look at the charts for, what's our distribution for CPUs across all of our VMs? Are most of them between 6 and 12 or higher? Things like that. And those are really common questions that you get from your leaders typically. So it's a really quick and easy way to present meaningful information to your leaders, while also sometimes you just want a quick answer, right?
Yeah.
You just want to know yourself. How many VMs do we have in the entire environment? What about in a certain cluster, et cetera? And so, it offers you a nice picture that you can share with others, or even just for your own personal use as an administrator.
Most definitely. And, the dashboard is definitely a great tool, and whether you're using it frequently or not, right? The operational overview and the inventory, like you said, it gives you insight into what the collectors are monitoring. And when it's an exact match to what I know about my environment, actually, like you said, it increases my confidence, right? In the proactive findings that the service recommends. And as you can see here from the configuration summaries and the pie charts, right? It's a lot happening here. There's a lot of data that provides all that insight that allow you, like you said, to do your job more effectively or to report up, right? So if you're using Skyline, make sure that you have all your endpoints connected, because again, it's the best way to make sure that you're getting the most comprehensive recommendations on how to keep your environment safe. So it's a great reporting tool, like you said, to sort of report up, and very, very graphic, very, very visual. And so Don, I got another question for you. So we've been talking about the insights and all the data that Skyline provides in this single pane of glass sort of interface, if you will. So when you're using this data, how do you develop and implement your remediation plans?
Sure, that's an excellent question. So we typically get our findings from Skyline Advisor either on demand through the web interface, or we also get them through email as they're discovered, which is great. And again, because Moffitt's very focused on best practices and fortification, we do challenge our administrators to review within 1 or 2 business days what the finding is, what is the risk, the complexity, all those things. Just do a brief analysis really of what this entails. And if it's something that we deem as actionable in the near future, we'll submit a change request, and that comes with a validation plan, implementation strategy, all those things. It goes to the change advisory board for approval, and ultimately will be implemented the following week probably. It'll be validated and closed out, and we'll update our documentation accordingly. So it's a very regimented process, and we try to be very not too formal, but we do try to make sure we're going through the proper channels on our implementation. We're documenting appropriately, communicating appropriately, all those things. We want to do the right things for the right reasons at the right time.
Yeah, so I've asked a couple of customers about this. Do you hide findings that you don't want to focus on, or do you keep them visible?
I personally do not hide findings. And the reason I don't like to do that is because, take for example, there's a finding that says you don't have DRS enabled on your cluster. And that's something that you want to be aware of, right? But on a staging cluster or a test cluster, it may not be all that valuable. That might be intentional that you don't have it enabled. But if you hide the finding, you may not know that you have DRS disabled on a production cluster. And so after going through the technologist course yesterday, I learned some ways to get around that. However, I still wouldn't hide a finding personally, just because I like to maintain that awareness. And if I can provide justification to my leaders that there's a rhyme and a reason for leaving the finding as it is,
keeping it visible. Yeah. Thanks for the plug, by the way. We're going to be talking about that in a minute, but thanks for that. And so we got to go back to log assist, man. So, we've talked about it. We've talked about how fast it was. So how are you using log assist in terms of like some of the overall benefits and that it's providing you and your company?
Sure. Well, as I said before, when we open a case with GSS, we initiate a log assist upload immediately. There's never been a time when GSS hasn't asked me for logs. And this is a true story. Just a couple days ago, I received a request from one of our engineers because, again, we just migrated to NSXT, and those logs are massive. And he told me that he actually could not upload them through the Customer Connect portal to the case because they were so large, and asked that we expand our log assist capability for NSXT, which requires certain permissions and whatnot to accomplish, so that he can get the logs of GSS at all. And so we did exactly that. We figured out what the permissions were for the documentation. There's a user account that's required in NSXT, and we configured that integration with Skyline, and he was able to upload his logs. And so that was a beautiful thing. We were able to enable or empower himself and GSS to even request logs from GSS directly. Our engineer doesn't have to upload them manually. GSS can say, we'd like to see this log and this log, and Skyline Log Assist can facilitate automatically.
Definitely, and it's definitely a game changer, right? We've done the math, right? Customers reporting like I said, that it's 17 times faster than their manual process of creating and sending log bundles to our support team. And as you pointed out, right, the whole log bundle creation and submission process, it's automated, right? You just simply associate the log bundle with an existing SR, and you select where you want to pull the logs from before you initiate the transfer, right? And then, like you said, you can even have your TSC request log bundles and even give them the permission to generate them on your behalf. And what I really like about it, right, is that you also get confirmation of the submission as well. So it's definitely a very, very efficient way to get those logs bundles generated and over to GSS. And with that, right, we talked about the time and the savings and things like that. How do you actually quantify the benefits that Skyline is providing?
Yeah, we don't actually have, a formula to quantify that in so many ways, but this is something that we do report up to our leaders. As we mentioned before, health checks and TAM reports, that's all wrapped into a presentation that goes to our leadership, and they see the Skyline findings that we have outstanding. They see what we've resolved according to the historical trends, and we do receive that recognition of, this is great. We're seeing that you guys are taking a proactive approach to, fortify our environment. And there's no doubt that some of the findings that we've implemented, some of those recommendations have effectively, saved us,
Yeah.
from PSODs, from inefficiencies. There are recommendations for high availability, and that's something you absolutely want to make sure is functional when you need it, right? So if you're being proactive about all those things, there are unrealized benefits that you can quantify when you're in a downtime. You can quantify that at that point in time. But if you're saving yourself from experiencing that sort of situation, you're absolutely winning.
Yeah. And you guys are leveraging TAMs, right?
We are.
And you're using health check?
Yes. Our TAM has done health check with us, I believe every quarter is about right. And I see there's a new feature for our TAM to be empowered to extract that information through Skyline, which is great because not that it was a painful process, but we used to generate those bundles ourselves using a Java applet, and it left some to be desired, right? But if we can go through Skyline and grab this information on demand, that's going to improve the frequency, by which we can have those meaningful discussions, and also provide most likely, more detailed information than health check is accustomed to providing.
And most definitely, and for those of you who haven't seen the health check in action, I'm glad that you mentioned it, right? Thousands of customers, like you, they trust our TAMs to really sort of accelerate that time to value, right? To really optimize the operations, sort of keep pace with things. And so if you're using TAM health check reports that are powered by Skyline Advisor Pro, you can actually do a couple of things, right? You're talking about that whole idea around time savings. There's no manual data collection, right? It's automated. You got integrated reporting, right? The TAM health check delivers reports in Skyline Advisor Pro as that single source of truth, if you will. The other benefits include the fact that it's a very, very holistic view that it provides, like you said, visibility across the VMware teams for proactive issue avoidance. And then last but not least, just the overall enhanced value, right? You've talked about this data and that deeper insight and the confidence that Skyline can provide by way of these TAM recommendations. And so if you're not using TAM health check and health check reports, I highly recommend it because it'll definitely make life easier for you. And then with that, Don, I got to say, we're at the end of our journey here, but I got one last question for you, my friend. Any parting advice from the audience? What best practices or tips and tricks would you give your peers who are interested in using Skyline if they're not using it now?
Sure. Absolutely use some of those features that we talked about before, upgrade recommendations, log assist. If you haven't used log assist before because you haven't had the need, or you're in that habit where you used to just generate them yourself, give it a try. Let it prove to you how much faster it is, and that it doesn't require any babysitting on your part. You click the buttons, you send the log off, and you can go on to more meaningful things, whether it be communications because of a downtime or root cause analysis, all those things. It's great to have Skyline in your corner to take care of that for you and offload those tasks. Aside from that, absolutely use the upgrade recommendations, because that's going to help you be a more effective administrator or engineer. You're going to save as you said earlier, you might save yourself from yourself because these are not easy tasks, and it's easy to make a mistake, right? So if you can have an objective set of eyes to look at it for you and provide some insights, that's absolutely valuable. And I love that Skyline to date has never told me to purchase more licenses or more hardware or anything like that. It's not, it's not presenting itself as a sales tool. So it truly is objective, data-driven information that can really empower yourself just to be the most proactive and on top of things possible.
And with that, Don, thank you for that. And that concludes our webinar. And Don, I want to thank you for taking the time to share with the world your experience with the Skyline service. And for everybody in the audience, if you're not using it, highly recommend that you get started today. You can just go to a couple of the links here. You can try things like our hands-on labs. You can check out our FAQs. You can take a trial of its integration with vRealize Operations Cloud. And we've also got a moderated community where you can get answers to some of your technical questions. Don, you touched base on this earlier, but if you haven't already done so, be sure to get your badge. There is a course online that you can actually take, and it's an intermediate course that consists of 6 different modules where you go through installation and configurations. You get essential workflows, including how to use Log Assist. There's also a whole section dedicated to API and how to automate findings like NTP. There's a section on security, and last but not least, this whole idea around unifying operations and management by showing the workflow between Advisor Pro and VRops Cloud. And workshops. I know before I get to that, we've also got workshops as well. So if you need assistance setting up Skyline, or you want a personalized demo, you want to get full use of the tool, you can sign up for a workshop today to get more value out of the service. And like I said, if you also want to test out some of our API scripts, be sure to go to the link here and you can download the Skyline Automation Toolkit that's been created by Sunny Nguyen. Again, he's our Senior Technical Marketing Engineer. Lots of great tools in there. You can do things like leverage scripts to implement remediation steps. You can do things actually like connect Skyline too. I noticed that people were using Jira and ServiceNow. Well, guess what? Sunny's got scripts that you can connect those, and so you can unify and you can create tickets out of that as well. So I highly recommend you go check out the toolkit. Lots of great scripts and automation tools in there. And then last but not least, just wanted to let everybody know that we've got some webinars coming up as well. So be sure to look out for our webinars in June, where Sunny's going to be going through a lot of those features inside of the automation toolkit and talking about the API. And then we're going to be doing later on in July an overview of the service for customers who are looking to know more about it. And with that, I want to thank you all for attending and see if there's any Q&A out there, Michelle.
I think we've answered the questions that have come in of Kelsey, and then we've given away one T-shirt to Chris. So
hey, Chris.
And then if there's any last minute submissions here before we let everyone
going
go.
Once, going twice.
Got 2 more shirts to give away, but we've also gotten some good feedback from Chris and Terry.
Good deal. You can always carry the shirts over to the next webinar. Sunny can give away 5.
Yeah. We can do that.
Nice. Well, with that, thank you, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.